Previously on fixing my WRX engine cooling problem. My engine has had nothing but cooling problems, and on track it was severely pushing coolant and overheating. So I brought my car to Paul's Autosport to work with other Nolan.
I'm Nolan, the actual mechanic doing the work on the car here. We're gonna make sure it's done correctly, not the YouTube way.
He walked me through the entire process from start to finish on how to pull an engine, providing his specialized expertise along the way. Once we had the engine out of the car, I stripped it down to the short block, rusty bolt after rusty bolt.
Well,
and once we finally had the heads off, we found our issue. And while I know you might be thinking head gasket, that wasn't the case in our situation.
the block is completely tore down and Nolan is currently cleaning off the heads, and the culprit of our cooling issue are gonna be these head bolts. So these head bolts that hold the head into the short block are essentially, they have a little bit of stretch. So the car has like 350 to the wheels on 85. It has a lot of age. It has like 115,000 miles on it. And with that spicy tune, essentially, when the bolts stretch just ever so slightly, it lifts the head off the block, and you're talking like thousandths of an inch. And that's enough for a little bit of that combustion gas to get into the cooling jackets. And when the air gets in there, it pushes coolant out into the overflow tank, and eventually it will overheat, which it did actually overheat on track because there was no coolant in the system. And this is very early in the stage. You're not gonna find anything on the gasket, but you're not gonna really notice anything, but it's enough to happen. And so it is time to basically replace these bolts with ARP bolts. So these are gonna fix our problem. These are the ARP head studs, correct studs? They're studs, right? Not bolts.
They are studs.
Yeah. To replace my OEM bolts, I have some ARP head studs, which were sent over by Import Image Racing. So the thing about these studs is that they're gonna have a higher tensile strength, and they're also gonna have a better clamping force on my engine, which is gonna be able to withstand all the power and abuse that I throw at it. They also are reusable, so if I ever have to tear this apart and take it apart and then put it back together, I can reuse these bolts, whereas the OEM bolts, technically you could reuse the OEM ones, but they are a one-time use kind of bolt, and you shouldn't reuse them. So the reality is the best option is to get a set of ARP studs for your engine, which is going to be able to just last a lot longer and withstand any of the abuse and power you put into it.
There's also multiple size studs to choose from, like 11mm to 14mm to 1/2 inch. With the car running 350 wheel horsepower on 18 pounds of boost, the 11mm are a perfect choice. And if you're still watching, don't forget to subscribe and like this video.
Down threads, all up in it, that's not what it's for.
This?
Yes. Like, yeah, in this case, like the threads are tight, so we're gonna use a little bit to help in getting to that torque value.
To go along with the head bolts, we also have a fresh OEM
head studs. Sorry.
To go along with the head studs, we also have a fresh Subaru gasket kit, which was also sent over by Import Image Racing. This kit has everything that you need to take apart your engine and rebuild it, which is gonna include a fresh head gasket. And fun fact, turbo Subarus are not known for head gasket failure. That was a different engine. The EJs are not prone to that, so it's just a common myth. That's just not the case. They're not known for failures. I know everybody says that they are. It's not true. So comment below if you think it is true.
So this is Permatex copper spray gasket. I like to call this my insurance policy when you're doing like non-machined engine assembly. So obviously if we're doing a new short block or new heads, we're gonna send one or the other out to be machined so that it's a fresh on fresh surface. In this case, the engine and heads are already matched, they're already used, so we don't really need to machine them. They checked out flat, so obviously there's room for mistakes to happen there, and this stuff just helps seal up the mistakes. Washers, and with great care, oh, we gotta take the cams out, sorry. So the service manual tells you which way to put them so that you don't have to open the valves to rotate them into position, but it doesn't matter. So the idea is we don't want oil and such. It's flipped, right?
3, 4, 5, 6.
Yes.
Okay, I got it now.
Yeah.
But still, if I looked at that without you here, I'd be like,
I know.
So Nolan torqued all of them down, but he saved the last one for me just to see how tight 90 foot-pounds of torque really is. That's not heavy at all. What are you talking about?
All right, so this one. So now get that to click.
That's not bad.
So imagine doing all 6 of them though.
Yeah, that's
in
not
a
fun.
row.
That's not fun
It's
at
not
all.
fun.
With the fresh ARP head studs installed, Nolan continued his work by reassembling the heads using the all-new fresh gaskets from our gasket kit. I made sure to focus on each step and all the nuances of putting everything back together, like ensuring engine lube was applied to all the rotating parts for startup, because after he completed his work, it would be my turn to apply all my learnings to complete the other side.
It's a struggle, baby.
With one side completed, it was my turn to apply the gasket insurance policy and reassemble from start to finish the other side. Most of it is highly systematic, and as long as you go through it one step at a time, it's a relatively easy process. The most important thing when putting it back together is ensuring the studs and the covers are all torqued in the proper order sequence and to spec. And once I finished reassembling these heads, there was another issue that we needed to fix before this engine was ready to rip again.
We also have some fresh oil and some spark plugs as some maintenance items. Of course, we took it apart and drained the oil, so we need some new oil. And then when we took it apart, we also found out that we needed to replace some more parts.
When we were taking this engine out of the car, I was on the edge of my seat to pull the timing cover off and see what lied beneath.
How about that, dude?
Nolan had told me that the timing was done. Of course, that raises concerns immediately of, well, what parts was it done with? It's China bearing. Yeah, this is all China stuff. I would replace all this, the belt's good. So in this case, it was nothing but the finest quality Chinesium from our friends over at Gates. Of course, you've got nice failing oil seals, leaking bearing grease, leaking tensioner, you name it, the shit sucks. Right, so in all seriousness, there was a period of time where Gates was kind of the go-to manufacturer for timing belt and water pump kits for Subaru engines. Unfortunately, that time has kind of passed as they've switched to supplying a cheaper quality kit with Chinese parts. With that said, there is still an alternative kit available from Gates. These would be any of the kits ending in the letter N in the part number. So in this case of a Subaru timing belt kit without water pump, you'll have TCK 328. That will get you China parts, or you can have TCK 328N. That will get you good OE Japan parts.
Hey man, so we have a little bit of a problem. We're gonna need some overnighted parts. Is that something you can help out with? Because Nolan said I am no longer allowed to use the old timing components that are cheap Chinese, we went ahead and got a Company 23 timing kit. So this has all the pulleys, a fresh belt to replace it with. We did have to give Import Image Racing a call to send this over last minute, and they were able to overnight us this kit for us. They also sent over some gaskets that are already on the engine, like the turbo up pipe, gasket, and everything, because those apparently do not come with the gasket kit because I guess it's not a part of the engine. So we had to get a couple more gaskets and some couple more hoses to replace them out with. That is one thing about them, is that they can overnight you parts if you need it in a pinch. So a lot of the parts that we have, like the bolts, that gasket kit, the timing kit, can be overnighted if you order it before 3 o'clock. And it's nice to know that if you need something really quick, that can be done.
So another nice little Subaru timing system PSA here. This is your factory or OEM plastic, in this case exhaust side cam sprocket. These are made of plastic, and if they are on your original engine, they could potentially be up to 20 years old at this point. What we know about plastic is when it gets old and goes hot and cold a lot of times is it gets brittle. So in this case, you see there's some minor fracturing of the plastic part here. Long story short, you don't want this to explode when it's spinning at potentially 7,000 RPM. So that's where these come in. This is a product made by Roger Clark Motorsport. They are a full billet aluminum replacement for the plastic cam sprockets. Just a nice peace of mind, kind of replace it once and be done with it. Really nice looking product, good finish to it. We like them.
While Nolan worked on getting the engine timing components reinstalled and all set, I focused my attention on other areas of the engine like replacing the rock-hard cooling and PCV hoses. Over hundreds of heat cycles, it's extremely common for these hoses to become rock-hard and eventually crack, leading to problems, so all new hoses were a must.
Spark plugs, very important. So these are the NGK one-step colder, and they're gonna run a little cooler, and that's what we want. So cool engine, happy temps.
Per usual, the upgraded parts piled on. Another item to address is the aged clutch fork. While currently it seemed like it was in good condition, it is an area known to have a failure point where it can crack or bend. While it's more common with upgraded clutches going beyond what the fork is meant to hold, it made sense to replace it with a fresh OEM fork since the engine was out and we had access. The throwout bearing was also showing signs of wear and tear, and it was on its last leg, so we also replaced that with it. And no engine rebuild would be complete without a fresh oil change package of Motul 8100 XS 5W40 and a brand new filter.
Crazy.
That power steering pump is pissed. It thinks like the flex fuel and the fuel pressure sensor like aren't plugged in, but they could just be like holdover. Well, when I hooked the battery up, the key was on, so maybe that's what it's from.
Dang, dude. She's ready to rip.